Welcome into the D2 Baseball Podcast. Robert Frey here today, joined with special guest Wayne Cavadi. Today, we're going to just kind of preview the 2026 Division II baseball season as we are just days away from opening day. So, Wayne, how you doing today? Ready for the season to start?
I'm uncharacteristically cold in Georgia, so I don't know that I'm mentally in baseball mode yet. But yeah, I am definitely ready for the season.
Yeah, we're certainly two different cuts of cloth because this is Chicago cold is kind of just, hey, this is kind of normal,
Right.
what it is, but can't imagine what the weather is down there. But either way, there's some teams that have obviously with this cold have had to move their schedules around. A lot of double headers Friday opening day that you'll see, especially down south. So we might see it, but be sure to go on that daily schedule on D2 Baseball, DII baseball.com to be able to keep up with that gets updated every day. So be sure to check that out and see live stat schedules and times for games on a daily basis. So, but to get started too, let's talk a little bit about the top 25 that we put out way back January 19th. And, if you don't know, Wayne does help with that and helps talk it through. So, Wayne gives kind of some initial thoughts. But before I do that, I'll give you like the top 25 as a rundown. So Tampa 1, Central Missouri 2, East Stroudsburg 3, UT Tyler 4, Northwest Nazarene 5, North Greenville 6, Northwood 7, Florida Southern 8, Minnesota State 9, Topeka 10, Angelo State 11, Colorado Mesa 12, Lenore Ryan 13, Point Loma 14, Millersville 15, Cal State Monterey Bay 16, Westmont 17, Grand Valley State 18, Seton Hill 19, UND 20, and then the final 5 are Felician, Belmont Abbey, Davenport, Cal UPA, and West Florida.
That's solid, right?
Yeah.
I think with the transfer portal has obviously changed the game, but I think the D2 level, out of all, as you know, I cover all D2 sports, and I think baseball is the least affected by it. And what I mean by that is, sure, we're going to see some of the bigger stars, get calls from D1 and they're going to move. But the NAIA and JUCO levels for baseball are unlike any other sport. And are you going to be able to replace some of these guys 100%? No, but you could probably get 70% of the production and still be able to roll. So when you asked me to help with the top 25 and then, my power 10, when you asked me to help with the top 25, I think what you need to do in this era of D2 baseball is look at the teams that have been there. I started covering D2 baseball in 2014, and I'm telling you right now that this top 25, probably 70% has been there since the day I've started covering them. So that means they've seen change. That means they've gone through, constant recruiting and constant transfers. So these are the programs I feel confident in. Now, the only thing is it's the preseason top 25. We have nothing to base it on, but, reports that we're getting about transfers, about how people look. I didn't get to every school in the fall. You didn't get to every look. And, so we're getting, let's be honest, some of these may be overhyped reports. We don't know how good and how well these players are performing. We're being told how they are. So I think what we did, I think the approach we took when we talked about it, and we talked for like an hour when we put this together, maybe even more. I think we looked at those teams that did very well last year, but overall programs that, they've been there, but act like you've been there before, as they say. And there's no reason to doubt that they're going to be performing well. And are you going to disagree with the numbers, like the ranking number that we came up with? Probably. But are you going to disagree with the teams that we have in there? Probably not. Right. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah. And it's a great way to look at it too. And, with the Patreon subscribers, it's now public now. So go on, DIVI@baseball.com/team sheets. You can see returning production numbers and exactly how much is returning. And so we kind of mentioned that talk a little bit because like other polls have been out too. And I know the biggest one that we probably have, or I should say two, discrepancy on is one, Lenoir-Rhyne, and two, Pittsburgh State. Lenoir-Rhyne 13 is because of their starters last year, only Mackenzie Wainwright returns offensively. That's a regular lineup guy. And then on the mound, Kellen Gradisar is the only rotation guy.
Yeah, 3 of the
After
4.
that, I mean, you have Preston Drevis, who threw 22 and 2/3 innings. Outside of that, nobody threw more than 6 innings, and that's just 2 additional guys. You're basically having to replace a brand new team. And that doesn't mean we don't think they're a top 25 team. Of course they're going to be. But, it's a lot more difficult. And then on the front of Pittsburgh State, history says that a new head coach that is new to Division II typically doesn't do well. Now, that's coming from the lower ranks. Now, if a D1 assistant, the team we just talked about, Lenoir-Rhyne's Konecki game as a D1 assistant, was an assistant at Lenoir-Rhyne before taking over the program, they did really well. But typically, teams don't perform as well with a new head coach that was never above a certain level. So Brock Buckingham, the new head coach, never was above the junior college level, takes over a Pittsburgh State program. And yeah, they do have, a couple guys coming back, but again, same thing. It's like a brand new team. They're returning about 14% of their entire team. And they're only, again, same thing. They have a strong bat in Dagan Brewer, but that's it. And anybody, all of their rotation arms are gone. They're returning 4 total starts from last year's team. And their highest returner, they have 2 guys above 7 innings. And so again, this is what we're basing off of in this era, transfer portal, and just understanding new teams. Pittsburgh State historically has not been a team that has gone above and beyond like they did last year. They won 42 games, great year. And I mean, part of it too is great coaching. We have to give credit to a guy like Bob Fernelli, who did such a great job, not just at Pittsburgh State, but every stop he's been at as a head coach before retiring at the end of the year. But now, he's not necessarily gone, because I think he's still involved with Pitt State in an administrative role, but he's not taking the day-to-day of the team. So there's a little bit enough of a doubt to say, hey, we may not think that they're a top 25 team.
Yeah. We talked about this when we made it, and I agree with you. I think one thing let's touch on Lenoir-Rhyne first. Okay. Honestly, 11 Angelo State, 12 Colorado Mesa, 13 Lenoir-Rhyne, 14 Point Loma, 15 Millersville, and honestly 16 Cal State Monterey Bay. Those are all top 10 teams, but because of the situation, Angelo State, I've never seen this few returners on an Angelo State team since I've started covering it. So these are basically programs that we trust. We have to wait and see what happens on the field, right? And that's really why they're at 11 through 15. And if your feelings are hurt by that, I think if you understand our approach to it, we just have a little bit more confidence in the teams that are above them based on the returners that are coming back. And I think Angelo State, Colorado Mesa, Lenoir-Rhyne, Point Loma, Millersville, and again, I even think Cal State Monterey Bay, I think they're all top 10 worthy. But we have to see what happens on the field. We can't just go by paper. But then you look at like a North Greenville or like a Tampa and the people that they do have coming back, you have more faith in that, right? Like that's all it is. And now we could get to Pittsburgh State. This is beyond, we have to see what they're going to do on the field. They're in a really tough region, right? They're in a super tough region.
Incredibly tough.
The MIAA, they don't have a lot of national champions in their ranks, but top to bottom, they are competitive with each other. It's not an easy grind to do. I know Pittsburgh State, if you're talking historically, the amount of wins they have, because you're right, like Bob Fernelli, he got wins, but that doesn't make you a top 25 team automatically just because you made the tournament last year and you have, the most wins in D2. Like there's more to it than that. And I'm confident having Pittsburgh State on the outside looking in to start. And of course, it's preseason. It's the hardest poll to make of the year because we have nothing to go by except what we're being told, and looking like you did in those team sheets at the percentage of returners. That's all we have. So I'm confident in the top 25 that we have. I mean, I don't want to bash any teams. That's never what I've been doing. If Pittsburgh, if there's a team in there that could be out, I think it's Felician. I don't know how they come back and do what they did last year, which would make room for some of these receiving votes teams. And you and I discussed it when we were talking about it. Augustana has a huge chip on their shoulder, missing the tournament with 39 wins last year. Francis Marion, when we talked about it, I dove into their draft class, their transfer class a lot more. So what they did lose, I was really impressed as I dug into it more after we spoke. And I think that they're going to be right up there in the top 25 as well. I think we may have underranked them. But yeah, there's a lot of wait and see, like North Georgia, what the heck's going to happen there? Like nobody, that's the team I go watch the most out of any because it's the closest to my house. And I don't know anyone on that. I know one person on that roster, and sure, you could say I know the head coach because he coached somewhere else in the conference, but it's not the same head coach I know when I go to that field, So that's another team that was top 25 last year, and now we got to wait and see. So yeah, again, I'm just there's a lot of question marks, and there's going to always be question marks in the transfer portal era, and I think we did a good job on the teams that we got here.
Yeah, and the beauty of it is, I should have it up here, is of the top 25 now, weather pending. A lot of them we'll get to see the opening weekend. So of the top 25, we have looks like 14 that are playing this weekend. Again, weather permitting. And it'll be exciting to see that, and what's exciting to see too is, on my mind is, the UT Tyler Angelo States of the world. How about this year, Lone Star Conference, their entire regular season schedule are conference games.
Yeah. I was talking about that earlier today with Coach Hanks at Colorado Mesa. You just and the problem with that is that when we get to selection time, like the RMAC is the other team in the South Central, and there's no common opponents because the RMAC, there's very few, maybe a couple of RMAC teams scheduled no, they don't because the Lone Star's playing the Lone Star, right? There's no common opponents, and that makes it really difficult for that region. And the South Central has always been, I think I'm pretty sure you're like me, and we're both proponents of a 64 team bracket. And that South Central 6-team part of the bracket, and you and I talked about it off camera earlier, the Atlantic. I mean, those are just two regions that are getting the short end of the stick, man, and they deserve more teams in there. And when you take away going back to the Lone Star, only playing the Lone Star, when you take away one of those metrics, you're taking away common opponents out of the picture. The RMAC, they don't stand a chance. We know Colorado Mesa is going to be there. Colorado Mesa has been there, 22 years in a row, right? Like, we know they're going to be there. But now it comes down to Regis, CSU, and these are all teams that were good last year and lost a ton. We're talking, I haven't looked at your team sheet, but I'm willing to say probably less than 10% of returners for some of the RMAC teams that were really good last year, So, actually, let's look. I got their page open. Let's go. RMAC, CSU Pueblo. There we go.
And you got Pueblo. I got Regis up. Regis is at 24%.
Okay.
So they return a quarter of their team.
Yeah. And then, wow, CSU Pueblo is 38. I did not think it was going to be that high. But offensively, we're back at 25%. So that's good for them. Because if you're returning 62% of your pitching in the RMAC, that you're at a bit of an advantage, right? And another thing, like, I'd love to see how some of these pitchers handle going to Colorado, right? Like, you look at some of these pitchers in the RMAC, and you're like, 5.8 ERA. Yeah, that's because the air is so thin. There's missiles hit on every pitch. Like, I'd love to see. I think Matty Brown is probably the preseason pitcher of the year on North Greenville. He's filthy. I'd love to see what he does against Colorado Mesa in Grand Junction. Like, and he's great. And I'm not saying he has an advantage of where he plays, because he plays in one of the top run scoring conferences in all of D2, and he's great. But I'd love to see what a guy like that does going to play in Colorado 64 games a year. Like, it's nuts.
Yeah, because I mean, think about this guy. He had a tremendous freshman year, and then the last 2 years are kind of, it just RMAC effects. Liam Hohenstein with Colorado Mesa.
Yeah,
I believe he had an ERA under 3 at Colorado Mesa, which is unheard of in the RMAC. And then the last 2 years, ERAs north of 6. But again, like, it's just, that's the environment you pitch in. So if you have an ERA around like 6, and I know I wrote an article about this last year, was, the run scoring environments, RMAC conference games on average the last couple of years score about 18 runs a game per both teams, and like the average is about 11 or 12. So you're getting an additional 6 runs. So I mean, it's tough to play in, but it's part of baseball, and it's part of the RMAC. And yeah, to your point, like, unfortunately, definitely, it seems like unless Colorado Mesa goes on this tremendous run, the South Central region will be represented by 2 Lone Star teams in terms of hosting.
Yeah,
and that's just versus the RMAC. That's a completely different environment to play in.
Yeah. Right, and you got to go to Texas, and you rarely have to go to Colorado. So, it's interesting. I think. And again, I'm not one of these I hate regionalization people, but where I am is I think we need to really, really fix regionalization. Do we go super regions, like football and soccer, and why is D1 and D3 at 64 team brackets and D2 can't? And I understand why the rationale is representation in each part of the region, but it just doesn't make it right. There's a way to get this done where we're not leaving out a 39 win Augustana team that probably would have done a lot of damage in the tournament. They were built for tournament play. So, yeah.
On that same note, like a Francis Marion team, 40 win team as well. Like, you leave them out and things like that. And like these are arguments you gotta be able to support. But either way, we're excited for a 2026 season. So, let's talk a little bit about like some intriguing matchups. Any come to mind for you, Wayne?
Well, I mean, you're talking about early season. I mean,
yeah,
you just got to click on the Houston Winter Invitational, and it's all right there. It is there. It's there every year. Just the teams that they have going. This year, obviously, Central Missouri is always there. That's why it started. Arkansas Tech, who is maybe not the favorite, but definitely a contender in the Great American. Ashland, who John Shaley is one of the winningest coach in D2 baseball history, right? Like a tournament team every year. North Greenville, who we're very high on. Rollins, who you and I talked about, they're not top 25, but they're sneaky good this year, and
they are.
Well, don't forget that before Tampa went back to back, this team went to this to Cary 2 years in a row, and sure they've been quiet the last 2 years, but they look tough. And then UAH, who knows? We'll learn more about them. So I think that's really where the focus is. But I don't have the schedule in front of me. Florida Southern, West Florida, is that opening weekend?
That's
the other one I have on my definitely on my watch list.
Yeah, and I mean, of the Houston Winter Invitational, of the 6 teams, 5 are either ranked or receiving votes. And so it creates great matchups too. Yeah. Like, here's the beauty of it for fans who also are not only college baseball fans, Division II baseball, but fans of like advanced metrics like StatCast data, the beauty of playing at Dakin Park, home of the Houston Astros, is these games will have StatCast data, and I will be able to provide, kind of a breakdown of what all this means, and then give you game links during the game to be able to follow it, so that way you can see like, oh, how hard is this guy throwing? Because Ashland last year they had a guy by the name of Hunter Allen who got drafted by the Baltimore Orioles.
Yeah,
he in Florida, it had a pitch that was on a radar gun, touched 100 miles an hour. So being able to see that, we have that kind of information available and be able to display it. So then, and two, like, you mentioned Matty Brown and this filthy stuff, we can see just how filthy it is.
Yeah.
With that kind of stuff. So that's another beauty of it. But yeah, we had up on our Patreon, we had a list of like 10 games to choose from. And our wonderful, wonderful patrons selected 5 of those 10. So some to watch, if you're Florida Star in West Florida, but Monterey Bay goes down to San Diego to play Point Loma for that's 3 games. That'll be a great one. And then the Lubbock Christian UT Tyler series kicks off. That'll be a 3-game series. So in the Lone Star, again, the 50-game conference, the first 2 weekends will be 3-game sets instead of 4-game sets.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then some other ones to look out for. So we ranked UIndy against Mississippi College, a team that won 35 games last year. That was a game away from knocking out Tampa in the regional, actually a strike away if you want to be even more specific. And then we have the last one we have is like a Concord Francis Marion series. So originally scheduled as a 3-game series. Right now, it was moved to a 2-game series, so it'll just be a doubleheader Friday due to weather that the rest of that weekend will be canceled. So, but some good series. Also, 2 teams who either won the regular season title or the tournament title, Harding and Delta State, will play each other. Again, weather pending. The Delta State, the reigning GFC regular season champions, also a regional appearance, and then Harding, the GAC tournament champions. That should be slated for a good matchup there. So a lot of good matchups to start there. And I mean, it also just creates opportunity to be able to follow these games again, hopefully weather pending.
Yeah. It's like I told you, I'd really love to get to that Georgia College Tampa series, but it's already been being moved around. And like I said, I'm actually looking on my phone right now for the weather, but it is going to be brutally cold here, and I don't know that I want to make the 2.5-hour drive for brutally cold. Milledgeville.
Yeah.
It is going to be on Sunday, 40 degree high, but it's going to be sunny. But Saturday is snow. So, and I think they already canceled the Saturday, right? They moved it to Fridays and 2 Sundays. 2
Friday and 1 Sunday. So yeah, that's not going to be great. And I mean, the other side of it too is there's a chance that Tampa, of all places, will get a 1/4 of an inch of snow because of lake effect. Think about that. Imagine. So I don't know if it seems like it does. That's not an option where they're going to flip flop and Tampa's going to go to, or they're going to go to Tampa again. But that is another great opportunity for games. But I mean, in these regions too, we can talk a little bit about there, going back to kind of that region format. We talked earlier about the Atlantic region having 6 teams. As of right now, in the top 25 receiving votes, there are 6 PSAC teams. So
crazy.
By all means, one team cannot make the regional because the MEC, the other conference in that Atlantic region, does get an automatic bid. Yeah. So being able to talk about that. But yeah, we'll just start, going region by region. Start with the Atlantic region. With everything you've covered so far, just talk about like teams to watch, players, so on and so forth. So that way we can, give the fans what they deserve.
Yeah, East Stroudsburg, what they're returning on the mound specifically is they lose a lot of their home run production. And who hit the walk-off grand slam? He's gone.
Rothenhausler.
Yes, yes, and he was a big bat, and they lose a lot of their home run. But to have the pitching they have coming back is huge, especially in the Northeast where pitching comes at a minimum. The team, well, we in Millersville, I don't care. We both talked to Coach earlier in the season, and he told me that it's the most players they've lost since the 2017 run that when they played Nova Southeastern, and he hasn't lost that many players. And I don't care. You're Millersville. Like he's a great coach. He's a great recruiter. They're still Millersville, but I think, and Seton Hill, they lose a lot of, when you talk about pitching that they lost, both went pro, I believe, right? You're talking about two studs. I don't like using the word ace. I think ace is one of the most overused words, especially in college baseball. If you're the number one pitcher in the rotation, you're automatically called an ace. And I don't think that's necessarily true. I think you have to earn the title ace. And they had two aces, right? That's how good Seton Hill was. But again, I have faith in them. Off those top 25 teams, you and I talked about it the day we were putting it together. Slippery Rock and Westchester look like two really good sneaky teams for the 2026 season. I'm really interested in seeing what they do. Westchester has the history. They have two national titles and since 2012. Slippery Rock has very little tournament history, I should say. But they have, they have one of the best players coming back in D2. So it's going to be a heck of a race to see, which team is left out of the mix. Oh, and Cal, of course, I didn't mention Cal, but I really, out of the teams where we know, the PSAC has certainties to it. We discuss it, like East Stroudsburg has all those returners. Millersville is always in the hunt, but I think Westchester and Slippery Rock are two teams really to watch there. What about you?
Yeah, I'm with you. And the reason why is, I know we talked about this, but the part of it too is to be a successful team. You mentioned ace, but you got to have a number one. And all these teams that we mentioned, maybe aside Millersville, Seton Hill, but they have this pedigree. They have number one. Like Slippery Rock has Nate Malik. Cal U has Michael Valenti. East Stroudsburg, I believe DeWeese is still there. They have their number one guys back, and that goes a long way. Being able to say, "All right, Friday night, we are comfortable with this guy," and part of it too is having that offense back, which is why East Stroudsburg's ranked so high. You have guys like Shanley Wall, Parker Fry, Walker Zampella, coming back. Chase Alvis should come back and get more at bats. Ryan Manning, he only had 74 plate appearances. He should get more at bats as well. And he's the guy that I like to mention, the guy that hit the longest walk-off in history, and not by distance, but by innings, because he had a 21st inning walk-off
right.
Against Southern New Hampshire last season. But that's kind of like the idea of the PSAC too, is there's really, it's really going to come down to that tournament time. And unfortunately, every year, especially, it seems like that PSAC tournament where that first game is single elimination, that can make or break some team's season.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's tough. Yeah, with the way the regions, if it was an 8-team region, you still got a fighting shot, but the way the region's set up, that tournament's tough. And the PSAC and the Lone Star are victims of their own circumstance, being massive conferences, right? I'm pretty sure they're the two biggest. I can't think of another conference that is up there that has that many teams.
I think the GLVC is close.
Is it?
If not, I think they have about 14 on their conference. But yeah, that's just the epitome of brutality. Unfortunately, is just you got so many teams, you can only have so many. But speaking of teams, in how many teams are in this conference? You have 11. So to kind of finish out the Atlantic region, the MEC. From what kind of who might represent the MEC, or could we see more than one representative?
It's a great conversation to be had. Like, man, Frostburg State, they like who are we looking at here? And I think that's the Charleston is a great like staying power, right? Like they're always in the hunt, but is what I mean by that. Frostburg State, Point Park is not really in the conversation because I don't believe they're tournament eligible yet this year.
They're not.
Right. So let's take them out of the conversation. But you got Frostburg State, who had a really good season for them last year. You have Charleston, who is always going to be in the mix in their division. I really like what West Virginia State's been doing. I feel like they've been knocking on the door and creeping up slowly. But honestly, Glenville State is always sneaky, so it's tough. But I don't think the MEC is one of those conferences that doesn't have the runaway team, right? I think it's a lot like the Midwest region. It's anyone's to take. And I think that makes it difficult, especially when it's likely the automatic bid that's getting in, and it's tough for the other teams that are battling for the season. So every game counts for these guys, and especially depending on who you open your non-con with, because those games are going to hurt your strength of schedule and common opponents come into play. So if you're asking me who I think are the names to watch, it's Frostburg State, Charleston, West Virginia State. I think those are the three.
And then another sneaky team, and you mentioned just like a non-con team we talked about earlier was Concord. So they open up with Francis Marion. Yeah. Their biggest pieces, right? They have preseason first team All-American Caden Swainbaugh on the plate, Matthew DeSanti, offensively Corbin Bostic. They return a lot of their offensive production. It just really depends on how the pitching will progress. Like Brock Taylor in limited innings did well, 4.15 ERA, 254 batting average against. Jake Robinson, really good strikeout percentage and low walk rate. 22% strikeout percentage, 9% walk rate. He might do well, in a full season, especially as a starter. But again, it definitely seems like in this conference, not saying it's going to happen, but it'll be really tough for someone outside of the automatic bid conference tournament winner to make a regional.
Yeah, it's gonna be tough.
And speaking of tough, the East region. We'll go to the East region next and talk about, it seemed like every year you could just pencil in Southern New Hampshire and be like, yep, they're going to represent the East. And then all of a sudden here they are, not making it to Cary last year, but not even making it to the postseason.
Yeah. And quite honestly, again, I'm being honest, right? Unless it's Southern New Hampshire, whoever makes it to Cary likely doesn't stand a chance, right? It's just a completely different kind of baseball in the East. First of all, you get the late start most of the time, and that was something Southern New Hampshire had an advantage of because teams wanted to play them early, right? Like you want to go challenge Southern New Hampshire. This was a team that made it to Cary 4 years in a row, and I think it was 5 of 6 or 6 of 7, something like that, and they pretty much should have been buy a house in Cary, for crying out loud, for how much they got there. And so they were able to test themselves, whereas the other teams in the East, no one really is traveling to play a Caldwell, right? Like nobody's and I think you got like the Malloys, the Mercies. I think you do have competitive teams. Wilmington, Delaware is always a fun bunch to watch, but at the end of the day, once they make the tournament and they got to play teams outside of the East, it really, I'm not trying to be mean, but it just really doesn't matter. And that's history, right? Felician, but we're not talking about Southern New Hampshire. Felician didn't stand a chance. New York Tech was a great story. Remember that in 2019?
Frank Catalanato leading the pack. And don't forget, they had EJ Cumbo there as well.
Freshman of the year. And it was a great, so yeah, it was a great story. But when they got to Cary, it was lights out, right? Like it was to a barbecue, as they say down there. So it's you're playing to represent yourselves in the East, and I think I don't know that there's a true contender in the bunch, but I am going to say, and we said this when we were talking about the top 25, I refuse to believe Southern New Hampshire is not back in the tournament this year. It's just not a program that there's a 2-year hiatus. It's not. I know it's, head coach Shank is newer. What's this, his third season? Third. But it's just not in their DNA. They're going to find a way to get back there. It's not. I think that's the team that will to beat in the entire East.
And yeah, and too, like Wayne's not saying a baseless conclusion by saying the East region doesn't have a chance. It's just backed by data. Since 2010, the East region has the worst record in the World Series at 13-30, and they have gone 2-out this past season. 2022, 2021, 2019, 2016, 2015, 2014, 2011. No, excuse me, not 2011, but a lot of 2-outs. It's a weaker region, and that's why
Well, it's the you look at it and you don't have the 95-mile-an-hour pitchers, right? And even if you do, they're not doing that until about maybe April or May because they start so late, right? And even when they start, it's freezing. So it's just that they're at a disadvantage. And that's not to say there aren't good teams. Bentley is very good. I think Bentley's going to be very good this year. Franklin Pierce is typically, they're going to battle. And again, Southern New Hampshire, I refuse to believe they're not a tournament-bound team. But, it's just a different style of baseball, and it doesn't, unfortunately for them, it doesn't translate in the tournament unless you're Southern New Hampshire, who has made a couple deeper runs than anybody else in the East.
Yeah, but speaking of East, and the NE10, a team to look out for definitely is Bentley. Reason I say that, you have preseason second-team All-American Brandon Sensage, who had a 1.148 OPS last season. Stan DeMartini's the third. He comes back with over 1,000 OPS again in an East region. That's pretty good. Then you have NE10 Pitcher of the Year Pat Heber returning. NE10 Freshman of the Year Zach Egenbrod returning. You have their entire rotation returning, and they keep climbing up. So like the last 3 seasons under Mike Hill, who replaced Bob DeFelice, rest in peace to Bob, after like 40 years of coaching, more or less, something like that. Each year he has steadily climbed in terms of wins. Last year they won 33. So this year I feel like they could be a sneaky team on that rise. And then the other question, again, just kind of shifting gears in the ECC, is Malloy. Every year they represent the ACC. If you want to talk about a runaway in a conference, Malloy is that runaway in the ECC every year. And so you want to talk about a team like that, it's just they always, every year it seems like they got bumped up against Southern New Hampshire and couldn't get above them. Last year it was, quite the opposite. They had that chance, and I believe it was Felician who knocked them out.
Yeah.
And who ended up, so basically every time they play someone and they lose out, they end up being the team that represents Cary. But again, you have a guy like JC Kiss coming back, Mike Knapp as well. Offensively, Sean Welsh is coming back. He also will deliver some innings. Can't forget about James Sill at a 1.52 ERA and over 59 in the third innings last year too. So they definitely have the rotation for it to represent Cary. It's just once they get in the postseason, it's getting beyond that point, whether it be regional or super regionals, to win that additional game to be represented in Cary.
Yeah, and I think it's Mercy or Malloy in the ECC. Not just talent, but returning, and it seems that they've been the 2 teams to beat. Kind of like you said, it's Malloy, right? Like, and Mercy has been knocking on the door for the last couple of years, I feel like. So I think that's where you're looking there. Yeah,
and to go over the CACC, I think Jefferson will do pretty well again this year. Now they lose 2 of their starting pitchers, but they do bring back guys like Gabe Silva, Kevin Baez, and then obviously Thomas Manischewski, who's a first-team preseason All-American with a OPS of almost 1,300, which is pretty darn good. Justin Egner is another guy to look out for, high OBP guy. But Jefferson, you can't count out Goldie Beacom too.
I love Goldie.
They're a regional team every year. So they compete well, and yeah, it's just how does Felician repeat their success from last year, and then obviously you mentioned Wilmington as well. Wilmington's on their team to keep an eye out for in the CACC.
Yeah, and I'm looking right now. Actually, I'm going to your team sheets. So Felician returns almost 60% of the roster. And it's a nice mix offensively and pitching. So, they got to be considered among the favorites. Obviously, if you made it to Cary, and, they record setting, for their program, record setting year. So, yeah, we'll throw them in there. I just don't. It's just such a wild card in the CACC. You never know what's going to happen.
You never know, and. Like there's some consistency. Like, again, we mentioned Goldie Beacom. They bring back Connor Blentz, who at the start of the year wasn't their ace pitcher, but by the end of the year he was.
Yeah.
And, you have a guy like that. You have Bobby Stewart, a guy who's moving from second to short, creates opportunities there. And then like a team like Wilmington, again, they're always in the mix.
Yeah.
No matter, and they hosted a regional last year, so. Who's to say they were that interesting one where weather kept pushing it back and they had to play like Sunday and Monday.
Yep. Yeah.
But that's kind of the East region. And now we'll go to let's do the Central region now, where you have a pretty common denominator there.
Yeah, I mean, we know Minnesota State's in the mix. We know Augustana's in the mix. We know Central Missouri's in the mix. So we got the big three. I think it's going to be. I think you have the GAC, the NSIC, and the MIAA. I think all three conferences at the top are very heavy and competitive amongst each other. Probably Friday. I put out my field of 56 and preseason field of 56. And, usually I'm happy if I get like 75% right. And I've been on target the last 2 years that I've tried it in the preseason. Again, there's no way of telling. But this is one of the toughest regions to project every year. I mean, you do have your kind of guaranteed spots, but even Augustana last year wasn't that. Even though they played so close to being that, they weren't that, and they didn't make the tournament. And if you don't think that stings, they're going to be one of the best teams in that region, I think. Where do you want to start? NSIC, MIA? Where do we want to start?
We can stay on the NSIC train to start. I mean, yeah, it's you talk about Augustana, you talk about Minnesota State. That seems like the two teams at the top that could represent well. Like. I'll say Sioux Falls is on the climb. I don't think they're quite there as a regional team yet, but they are on the climb. It'll be interesting to see how they do. But again, Augustana has a chip on his shoulder. But also we got to talk about a team like St. Cloud State. Now they had a down year, but they're typically a team in the mix. I know, especially since you started covering them around that time, they were like a 40+ win team, like it was nothing.
Yeah, Dolan is definitely a solid head coach. He's proven that he's a winner, and they return quite a bit from last year. And when I do my conference previews, I kind of dive into their transfer classes, and he got a nice little mix of people, and you get someone. He got Minnesota Crookston's top hitter last year. So you have someone with NSIC experience coming in, and that's going to be an instant success on your team. And I do think St. Cloud State, I think you mentioned Sioux Falls. I think Wayne State is a team. Nebraska, Wayne State. Obviously, we're not at the Midwest yet. I think they're a team you got to watch. And Minnesota Duluth took big strides last year, and I think they have a nice, quite a few nice pieces back that they're going to make noise. And that's what I'm saying. The top half of that conference is going to be very, very competitive with each other. And then you got, you have like UMary, who arguably has the best player in the conference. And you wonder what they could do with another year building a lineup around him and building a team around him. So I think there's a lot to watch here, and this is another one that we were taught. I don't think we said them, but this is one of the bigger, deeper 16 teams in here. Well, no, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yeah, 16 teams. Like, it's brutal. That's brutal. And so to be in that top 8, you really have a chance. But look, Minnesota State with Majors. I just think they're too good. And he's not the only one coming back, but he's one of the best D2 players out there. So I just think it's their conference to lose.
Absolutely. I mean, they're like with Moggers, he's a preseason first team All-American on both sides. Sam George comes back, 2.97 ERA as a preseason second team All-American. They bring back Jake Bertland, but they hit the transfer portal pretty well because they brought in first team all conference, or actually first team all region, and Ethan Bowers from Illinois Springfield. Yeah. So you get a lot of opportunities there. They're always going to play well. Yeah, and that's kind of like the opportunity. But I don't know, like my other side of it is, like you mentioned earlier, I think Augustana's really going to play with a chip on their shoulder because they're like, how dare you not let us in after winning 39 games and playing, the schedule that we played. Because last year they went down to Arkansas to play some of those teams that got in over them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And this year I'm checking right now. Don't they have Colorado Mesa in like 2 weeks?
They do. Well, I think it's close to the end of February because they open up with Bemidji State, then Duluth, then they have Mesa.
Okay.
But like that helps their strength schedule. Then they have 4 games set against Drury, but then a midweek at Drury, so it's a neutral site game against Grand Valley.
Yeah. Yeah.
So again, another boost to their schedule.
Yeah, and that's a big I think Grand Valley, we'll talk about that more, but I think they may be the team to beat in the Midwest this year. So that's a huge matchup for them.
But another huge matchup is now we go to other conferences, the MIAA.
I mean, Central Missouri country, right? It's who's going to beat Central Missouri. Obviously, already people complaining about Pittsburgh State, which, again, understandable. You probably have the MIAA Player of the Year in Brewer on your roster. I get it, but what's not coming back from the coaching staff all the way down to the other players is the big question mark. We'll talk about the Central. You're always going to talk about the Central Missouri, the Pittsburgh States. Fort Hays State was good last year. Central Oklahoma usually sneaks into the mix. Some years they're lights out good. Other years they're just kind of there. I think this is a year that they're very, very competitive, even though they have a pretty much new offense, on that side of it. But I think one of the teams that I'm interested in watching is Rogers State. I don't, they got one of their returning starters back. I'm looking at my write-up here. You got some good transfers. Sammy Harris is one of them from Arkansas Little Rock. You got a good mix of guys coming back from a team that kind of took a step forward last year, and then you got some good D1 transfers coming in. I think they're if you're digging deep, I think they're one of the teams to watch this year.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see. I know another team that gave us a little bit of I don't know, kickback in terms of top 25 is Washburn, and I'm like, Washburn, they did lose a lot, but we'll see, offensively what they look like. They bring back their only starter they bring back is Jackson Murvash, and then outside of that, nobody above 50 plate appearances returns. So then you have other guys like that. But yeah, to your point, Roger State, the guy I want to talk about is Andrew Ramirez, their third baseman, I believe. Had an over a 1,300 OPS. Their RBI leader was 60 last year. It's just really comes down to who can pitch, and not saying they're going to be in this year, but it'll be very curious to see, not just this year, but going into the future, what John Martin does with his college back at Emporia State. Returning to home. You do have a pretty big bat in Noah Steele there, who's a preseason second team All-American, roaming right field. But it'll be interesting to see there. But again, it just comes down to who, if anybody's going to dethrone Central Missouri in that conference.
Yeah, and I know. And going back to Washburn, they're pretty good, And then I'm looking at their transfers now, and it's this Jack Borgman from JUCO. He hit 377 with 17 doubles and 13 home runs last year. And then you throw in, I am going to butcher this guy's name. So Levi Risenhoover, he is another JUCO transfer, hit 320 with 9 home runs. You got Ian Luce, who is another JUCO transfer that hit 343 with a ton of stolen bases. This is a team that, they did well last year. They made the regional, right? And they went out and they didn't rest on their laurels, and they did get better. I'll give them that. Does that make them a top 25 team? I'm not there yet, right? But they're definitely in the conversation of the, who's going to be at the top of the MIAA. There's no question.
Absolutely. And, with how the MIAA tournament is now, anybody could represent that region with a single elimination format. We saw last year, 5th seed Central Oklahoma took down, I believe, they were the 7th or 8th seed, Northwest Missouri State, which we haven't even mentioned. Northwest Missouri State, they got to the tournament championship game.
Yeah.
And so it'd be excited to see what year 2 of Tony Jandrin does there. But now the GAC, which I know, you mentioned in your preview, which, to other fans, if you want to see additional D2 content, make sure to subscribe to Wayne's D2 report. But the GAC, you mentioned it could literally be anybody's race in there.
Yeah. Whose is it, right? Like it's really hard to say. Both Arkansas, well, I don't want to say both teams, Arkansas Tech and Southern Arkansas and Arkansas Monticello were all good last year, and none of them really got worse, right? Like I feel like the GAC compared to other conferences got maybe hit a little bit harder, maybe at the top of the teams I really looked at as far as returners. And it's also really tough to recruit there, right? It is hard to not recruit, but get transfers, because there's a lot of schools in that area at the D1 level, like whatever we call them in baseball, mid-majors, lower level D1s, but there's a lot to compete with. But, again, we're looking at the reason that Arkansas Tech and Southern Arkansas and Arkansas Monticello have been in the conversation the past 3 years is because they continue to bring in the players that they need. I think, I like talking about potential sleepers. That's kind of what we're looking at. I'm thinking maybe we'd have to jump down at like a Northwestern Oklahoma State. I think they got some interesting players. They were a 30-ish win team last year, I believe. I can't remember. Yeah. But they lose quite a bit. But that anything could happen in the GAC. And the thing that about the Northwestern Oklahoma State that I said, they return a bulk of their pitching, and when you have pitching coming back, that's kind of an advantage, right? So I don't know. I think this is wide open. I think it's Arkansas Tech's to lose right now. But honestly, Harding is good enough to win this. Southern Arkansas is always going to be in contention. I just think it should be a fun tournament teams. If I had to pick the tournament teams that are going to make it, I'd feel comfortable penciling in Harding and Arkansas Tech right now. Washita, you have to with Oberle back, you got arguably the best pitching staff in the conference alone just because of him. He's that good.
Yep.
So is that the surprise team here? So I just think it's wide open.
It is, and I think too, like the reason why I lean Arkansas Tech and something like this is you bring back Cole Dawson, who's going to be your shortstop. You bring back Tyler Sardelli. You bring back Kirby Jenkins, guys with OPS is above 940. You bring back your ace and Daniel Hutchinson, who, I mean, he had a 4.95 ERA, but that experience will go a long way, especially, being the game one starter. A D2 baseball. We don't say Friday night guy because most of the time you don't play Friday night.
Yeah.
So game one starter, but yeah, I'm with you though, Wayne. Like there are about 5 or 6 teams on this list where I could see them make a run. And I mean, that's just a testament to the GAC. Because think about, I think it was 2024 when the first place team and the 8th place team were separated by 4 games.
Yeah.
And that's just a testament to the strength of the conference.
Yeah.
And so now, and speaking of strength of a conference, we'll go to the Midwest region, and we'll start very aptly with the GLIAC.
Yeah. Well, I already kind of said it, that I think Grand Valley State is a team to beat in the Midwest. So the GLIAC, we have Davenport, who lost a good chunk. You have Wayne State, that's always going to compete. I like Saginaw Valley. I think they could be good enough
too.
I think that they could actually sneak up there and be very competitive in there. But I just think, Saginaw Valley with Jack Decker at pitcher, I think that's kind of where I am. Lucas Mead in the lineup. Like, I just think they have like these really, really, I don't want to use the word superstar, but very good players. We're talking about they're going to be first team all conference. Like, that's where I think they are. And you have a pair of those, right? And I think that's huge. So I think that's a team that you got to watch there. But Grand Valley State, this could be probably the best team that they've put together in a while. They just the returners, the transfer class is monstrous. They brought in so many people. Again, we have to wait and see how they adapt to D2. But you look at this guy JJ Mannion. He was in the bullpen for Kalamazoo Valley, and he pitched 3.17 ERA, 1.04 WHIP, and recording saves. Just a bunch of these guys. Jacob Skaggs, another guy. He had /287, 389, 510 with 41 RBIs and 37 runs scored, 11 doubles, 10. So like these are guys that are going to produce, and I just think Grand Valley State is super deep right here.
I mean, you mentioned like Jake Skaggs at Pitt State. Another guy is like Will Bowen from Hawaii. Comes to Grand. That's another guy. I mean, you had Duncan McLaughlin from SIUE, who had a 3.86 ERA over 21 innings last year. Keegan Bobbitt, who was the ace at Roosevelt, I should say the game one starter at Roosevelt. You should probably get better in terms of ERA, pitching behind a better team. But then, like, you also mentioned, like, yeah, and you mentioned, like, the freshmen, 2 freshmen they have, Jackson Keys, Michael Giroux, both guys that Giroux, as a freshman, has a fastball that is, up to the mid-90s.
Mm-hmm.
So having that as a freshman at the Division II level is impressive in itself. And that's why, you and me are both pretty high on Grand Valley and think it might be theirs. But, yeah, I'm with you. I think Saginaw Valley, like you mentioned, you have Meade, you have Decker back. You have some other guys back that can make some impact. Ryan Jarvis, Austin Cicerone, guys who can, put the ball around the yard, but, experience plays. So that's kind of the idea of the GLIAC. Now we go from the GLIAC to the GMAC, better known as the DG-MAC.
The G-MAC.
Is this a conference where, a team like is there going to be a team that kind of stifles Northwood and their run over the last couple of years?
I mean, Ashland is always in the conversation, but really last year, I remember when I was putting this together, I'm pulling it up now. Last year there was 2 teams with winning records, overall winning records here. So really, the conversation is between Northwood and Ashland. And again, I don't want to sound like I'm being cruel to any program, but Northwood, what they did last year was fantastic, and they made it all the way to Cary. They won 40 games. They return a bunch of what got them there, and your head coach is clicking with them, obviously. And then you have Ashland, who again, act like you've been there before. They have been there before. They have the winningest coach in D2 history. You got Sam Witt. I don't think there's too many surprises here. I don't know what else to say. If you want me to throw a dart and pick a sleeper, maybe Walsh, because of their division, so that that they're going to be in the mix come tournament time. But I really think this one is Northwood and Ashland.
I agree with you, but with Northwood, you bring back Tyler Sager. He's going to be your game 1 starter. Davis Wenzel, I'm excited to see what his sophomore year looks like, because he really rose late. A 1.71 ERA, pitched a ton in the postseason for Brad Baldwin and co. So excited to see that. Ashland, again, you mentioned Sam Witt. Pretty close, if not the best hitter in the GMAC right now. And then not to mention a team I want to mention, as just a player who can turn eyes, is Evan Oakley at Kentucky Wesleyan.
Yeah,
he's preseason pitcher of the year, and he's a 28% pay rate and a 2.24 ERA last year, over 80 innings. Be excited to see. But a team that I think can be a little sneaky, just in terms of returning production, is a team like Findlay, who returns over 80% of their production. And, some of the guys that they have are like a Casey Maruniak, who returns with an OPS over 1,000, Luke Sempton, Ethan Moore. Like, do they get better production out of their returning starters? Because they return 3 of their 4 arms in the rotation from last year's team. Does it get better with those guys? I mean, they could definitely be. And we also want to talk about preseason All-American Camden Tuttle, who had a 3.03 ERA and had a 26.5% strikeout rate. So just a 5% walk rate last season. So I think that's kind of the breakdown of the GMAC before we head off to the GLVC.
Another monster conference. So we had Lewis last year win the conference, right? I think they're still going to be pretty good. I don't see a reason for a major fall off. Again, like we could look at returning numbers, right? But you have to compare it on the level, and everyone's going through it, right? If you have more than 60%, you're one of the few. You're gifted, right? So it's a good analysis, but you got to look at it in the big picture. I think this is Illinois Springfield year to win the GLVC, but we talk about some of these conferences where anything can happen, and this is it. Maryville's going to be competitive. Lewis is going to be competitive. UIS is obviously going to be competitive. How do you rule out UIndy that's been to the Super Regionals 3 years in a row, right? Like, yeah, you lost people 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 transfers that I listed here that really stood out to me, right? That's a good amount of transfers that you're bringing in. Gavin Duran hit 328 with 6 home runs and 15 stolen bases for John Wooden. Like you got guys. Austin Polkley 379 for Lansing a year ago, right? You got guys that could come in and play right away. I just don't know how people always yell at the void about UIndy, but like this is a team that made it 3 super regionals in a row, and we're pretty close to making it to 3 carries in a row, right? Like they weren't far off. But what's Quincy going to do? Quincy is sometimes untouchable in that conference, and other times not. What's a Missouri S&T going to do? I just whereas other conferences, when we say it's anyone's ball game like the GAC, I think it's because it's a little top heavy, right? And there's so much good. Here, I think it's more that there's so many question marks, and we don't know maybe who's going to be really good quite yet, right? Because I think there's so much inconsistency in the GLVC outside of, a UIS who seems to always be there. Like I said, like a UIndy that you got to figure out how to stop, that honestly could be 30-22 heading into the tournament, but they just find another gear come May. So, yeah, I think that's kind of where I am, I got Kreider as my player of the year, the CCO on UIS as the pitcher of the year. I think Lewis has some good transfers. I wrote that down. I just think I think it's going to be a really interesting question mark of a season.
Yeah, and to talk about pedigree, we talk about teams with pedigree. This is why UIndy is a ranked team.
Yeah,
they've been to 3 straight super regionals. Only a handful of teams can say that.
Yeah,
and be able to say, hey, like we were one of the final 16 teams in the country for 3 straight years. So that's interesting to see. Now, kind of the sneaky team, not really sneaky because they were the GLVC tournament champions, but S&T,
yeah,
they rode the coattails of their pitching staff. They had the deepest pitching staff in the GLVC last year. They return a little over half of that, but they return almost 85% of their offense.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's going to be a flip-flop season for them this year where they're going to ride a lot in their offense, but that's a team to look out for. And you can't ever, again, count out a team like UIS.
Yeah.
And, like that's another team where you might think, okay, they deserved a bid, with 36 wins last year, didn't ultimately get it. But again, you have half your rotation back. Again, you mentioned Mark DeCiccio. I don't know if I said his name correctly, but that's you get half of your starters back. Again, I'll keep saying this. If you return your ace pitcher or your game 1 starter, you have a chance. And that's enough to say. And then you have 3 pretty good bats that had an OPS of near 1,000, and Johnny Wendling, Cody Morton, Nona Caceres. I know they had a kid from Heartland who came in. That should be a big bat. I think it's Corey Boyette off the top of my head. He should be an impact bat for him. It'll be interesting to see how the Prairie starts too. And like this year, Chris Rodriguez, who's in his first year as a head coach, he made a point to say, we're not going to be shafted by a weak schedule. And so they go down to Savannah State, and then that next weekend they go down and play Florida Southern for 4 games.
Yeah.
So, I mean, not only that, they host Davenport for 4 games. They play just a pretty tough non-conference schedule. And, they also have the beauty of a tougher GLVC schedule. And you got at UIndy, home against Maryville, at S&T, Drury, all these teams towards the end where you're playing a bit of a tougher schedule. So I'd say, it's pretty neck and neck, in my opinion, between UIndy and Springfield. But, look out for a team like S&T.
Yeah, I do think they're good. And, it's last year was their first, right? It was their first tournament championship, I believe, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
So, and to your point, like they rode pitching to get there. So it'll be, again, question marks, right? Like, now that they've been there, what do they do in part 2? So I think they could be very, very good. I do. I think they could be very good, but we got to see.
We got to see. And speaking of, we got to see, talk about the South region and see, let's just start with the obvious question. Does Tampa do what no Division II team has ever done in history and win 3 national championships in a row?
They definitely can. It's impossible to predict that. I mean, if there's a team that could do it, it's these guys, right? The problem for them is the SSC, right? That it's impossible. It's really hard this year. Florida Southern is going to be great. What Coach Odette did in 1 year there And then he gets back a guy that I had on my Player of the Year finalist when I did it on the D2 report. My finalist for D2 Player of the Year, Mike Scott. He's back.
Yeah.
You know what he did, what Coach did last year with the transfer class. You have to believe he brought in another, like last year was like all transfers because he just took over the program and said, you know, I'm bringing in my own team. This year he's got another like 8 or 9 that look like they're going to be impact, like right off the bat type of. I hate saying right off the bat for baseball; it's so cliche, but I think they're going to be impact right from the start. So like you know, so you got them. Then you got, we already talked about earlier that we think Rollins is going to be sneaky good and back in the mix again. Nova Southeastern, you got Manny Ramirez's kid alone. I'm watching him. You know, you could have, it doesn't matter who else you have. You got Manny Ramirez Jr. I'm watching that team. Barry is a conundrum because they returned no starters. But you know, Coach Price was very confident when I was messaging with him that, you know, he doesn't see that as a rebuilding year. He's retooling. And when you hear that from a coach, like there's coach speak, and we talked about it earlier. I'm not going to throw coaches under the bus. And there's other coaches that the sky is always falling and they win 45 games every year, right? Like, so to hear that, I don't think it's coach speak. To hear that he's been watching and what he's saying, Barry was very good last year. Are they going to be very good this year? They're a question mark. But, you know, I think between Tampa, Florida Southern, Rollins, and Nova, and you can even throw Florida Tech in that mix with what they have coming back. I think, and Barry, if Barry pulls it off, I think you have a very competitive. It's not going to be a walk in the park for Tampa. You know, let's go back to those 2 super regional. I'm sorry, 2 trips to carry for Rollins. In the first one, I don't think anyone gave Rollins a fighting chance, right? And in the second one, you're like, there's no way Tampa loses twice to Rollins, and they did, right? So it's a tough conference to get out of. You can't. Tampa doesn't have all these championships because they have a cakewalk. They really earn it. So I think it's hard to answer to tap them in as a champion. But I think if there's any team that could do it, it's them.
Any team that could do it is them. But yeah, the path back is incredibly tough. I mean, we mentioned Rollins again, and like Rollins, to go back to the Midwest region, they brought in a kid who had double-digit home runs at Quincy and Matt Mateo. Like, you know, that's going to play, you know, down here. And, you know, in Florida Southern, like you mentioned, like they do such a great job. Mikey Scott, you know, you have, again, ace is important. Sachin Ramos returns and is on that staff. And so, like, you have other guys that can do the job. And, you know, you have bullpen guys like Casey Odell. You bring in a couple of shortstops. One, Gavin Smith from IU Kokomo, who, you know, had a .611 slugging percentage. He had 11 doubles, 11 home runs, 14 stolen bases. You got Ryan Jenkins with great leadoff potential, who transferred from Carson Newman as well. You know, the path is there for Florida Southern, but again, you if anyone wants to represent the South region, you just have to go through Tampa. And that's the toughest one, because their entire portal staff are just brought in by guys who have high strikeout to walk ratios, guys who command the strike zone. And that at the Division II level is significantly important.
Yeah.
You know, as long as you guys have guys that don't walk people, you're going to be fine. And, you know, you bring in a guy like John Luke Glenn, who was a preseason All-American last year at Georgia College. You bring in BJ Bailey, who was at Clemson. I mean, you mentioned, you know, so many other guys, Alex Leish, Oscar Hernandez, Josiah Velasquez, all JUCO guys who, again, just had a lot of high strikeouts and hardly walked anybody. You know,
and you go to Florida Southern, and you know, Christian Carew throws 94, right? Elliot Jocelyn sits 6'6", throws 94, right? Evan Palmer sits at 90-92. Like, these guys went out there and they got strike throwers, big intimidating guys, and it's gonna be a fun race.
It certainly is, and I know I want to go back to Tampa. You know, they bring in Jordan Evans from Mississippi College, a guy, I mean, who hit the ball all around the yard and was stealing bases. Jake Books from Coastal Carolina, who was the national runner-up the Division One level last year. You bring in a guy like Jack Martinez who hit 321. Nick Pereira, double-digit home runs. Jesse Ponce at JUCO, he had 28 doubles in 2 seasons with over 100 driven in. Like,
yeah,
it's just going to be a tough conference, and I mean, I don't know about there's going to be some contenders in the other conference in the South region, but I don't know if it's going to be anyone outside of the Sunshine State.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. It's fun, but it's tough.
I mean, in the Gulf South, going there, you have your teams at the top, like a West Florida. That will be competitive. You have a Delta State that will be competitive. Mississippi College, came off a great year last year. They, lost a lot, so I don't know what's going to happen there. Valdosta State, another example. They're always competitive, but the big question mark is now you have a new head coach again. So there's roster turnover there as well. How do you navigate that? Lee, I think Lee will bounce back close to their 2024 form. They just had a, unlucky 2025. But that's still a competitive region. Like, again, like the super regional last year was Tampa against West Florida. That doesn't mean the Gulf South can't be represented, but it's just going to be a tough path.
Yeah. I like what West Florida did. I like who West Florida is returning. They got Eli Roberts from Flagler, who had a big year. They didn't rest on they're going to they made moves in the offseason that they want to win. They want to get out of the South. And I don't know that they will, but I think they're far and away. I don't want to say far and away because Delta State's always going to be a good team, but I think they are the team to beat in the Gulf South. What does Montevallo do? Right, like they're another team that is sometimes really sneaky. And you said Lee, when Lee had that run, and Coach Brew is great, but Lee had like those pitchers were unbelievable from like 2022, 23, 24. And if he could get some of these guys to get back to those levels, they're really tough out. And I think the same goes, Mississippi College. I think they're definitely a team to watch. But yeah, right now I do think it is West Florida to lose. But there's definitely going to be competition. It's not a runaway here.
Yeah, it'll be, I would say, in my opinion, to just the overall talk of the region, I feel like it'll be a little bit more competitive this year than it was last year.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment.
And so, and then to talk a little bit about the SIAC, that's another one where it's going to be a one-bid league, just for all intents and purposes. Savannah State had a pretty good year last year. Spring Hill will always be good. Albany State's also up there. Those are three teams to talk about.
I think that's the team right there that you just said, Albany State. They're always in contention, and they actually won a conference game last year. So I'm sorry, not a conference game, a tournament game. So they return a good amount, or what they return is good for them. I think that's the team to beat there.
Yeah. I mean, but those are typically the three you see, and Albany State brings back Luke Addison, who had over 1,000 OPS, so that just speaks to the opportunity there. So to kind of continue on, just quick rundowns. Southeast region, that's probably the toughest region in D2 baseball, right?
100%. Hey, my camera went off.
Oh,
I'm back. I'm sorry about that, guys. Yes, the Southeast region is without a doubt what I consider the toughest region in D2. There's You have two national champions coming out of there. What in the last 5 years, right? 21 was Wingate, and 22 was North Greenville. You know, I think it's the SAC, the Conference Carolinas. You know, it's and the PBC is, you know, the PBC is always the odd man out. I feel like they, you know, you got a good Lander team there. You got North Georgia, like I said, is a huge question mark, but Georgia Southwestern has had some really good years recently. You know, Georgia College, who knows what's going to happen there with a whole new coaching staff and new look team. But I mean, you're talking about North Greenville, Francis Marion, Mount Olive. Who am I forgetting from there?
Belmont Abbey,
Young Harris. Like these aren't just competitive teams in their region. These are national landscape, some of the best teams consistently, especially on the offensive side of things and run producing. You know, I remember I wrote this in my Conference Carolina preview. There were 64 teams that scored 400 or more runs last year, and 6 of them came from Conference Carolina. That's 10%. Right. And there's 250 plus teams in D2 baseball. 10% of the teams that are scoring 400 runs came from there. You know, it's just the competition in the Conference Carolinas alone is ridiculous. And like you look at like a Mount Olive, who's consistently amazing, and they're coming in preseason ranked number 5. Right. Like it's wild when you look at that. And then you have the SAC, right? Like you have Lenore Ryan, you have Catawba. These are 2 well coached. A lot of question marks for the Bears, like as we already discussed, but come on, like you got to believe in them. Catawba, Coach Gant, I mean, the guy has over 1,000 wins. There's only about 8 coaches in D2 history that have 1,000 wins, you know? Again, Wingate, you know, there's just all these teams, and I know we can't have more than 8 teams. I'm trying to get 8 teams in every region, but this is a part of the country that you need 15 teams just to sort through it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yeah, you mentioned like, and too, we didn't even mention a team like Carson Newman, who turned arguably the best 1-2 punch in the country in Colton Casson and Ryan Higgins.
Yeah,
you know, Colton, because before Higgins got hurt, he had a .83 ERA through 43 innings. Think about that. 8 weekends and he had an ERA under 1.
Well, he's my pitcher in the SAC in my conference previews. Obviously, I don't think it's much of a question. But they do, to your point, they have to be able to say that you could dethrone Catawba or what Lenore Ryan did last year. They have the pitching to do that. Carson Newman.
They certainly do. They certainly do. Now it's just, can their offense back that up and score enough runs to get in that hump? You know, they're definitely in that mix. But yeah, Lenore Ryan, you got Catawba. Those are probably the 3 biggest that I have in terms of the SAC.
Yep.
But then, you know, Conference Carolinas could be anyone. Anyone. I mean, yeah, we mentioned like Mount Olive 5th, you know, Belmont Abbey. You know, there's that North Greenville, Francis Marion, another team that won 40 games. You know, and you can't count out a team like UNC Pembroke as well.
They're always in the hunt.
They're always, you know, somewhat involved, and so.
Yeah, what does like a team like Shorter do with a year experience now in that? They look, I watch Shorter a lot because they're in Rome, Georgia, which isn't too far from me. So I knew that team very well, and that's another team that I think I know one person on the roster coming back, and this is a team I've watched for 4 or 5 years now closely, you know. But I like what Timmons does there. He's always done more with less. Yeah, I don't know that there's more a coach in D2 that's better at doing more with less. So I'm interested to see. It's just, you know, you go from the GSC where you kind of had a chance to sneak into the tournament as a sleeper for Shorter, and then you go to here and it's like you can have a 30-win season and you're in 8th place. Like it's just
absolutely. You know, they were in the play-in games last year. Like,
yeah,
you know, that just speaks the testament of conference. And like, yeah, like Young Harris, you know, they're in the receiving votes category. Like, they have some guys back, and I expect them to fully compete. Like it's just, it's one of these regions where the Conference Carolinas, especially, it's just one of those where you could theoretically say there are 8 deserving teams just in that conference alone
Uh-huh.
that
Uh-huh.
could be, a regional contender. And then
Every
that,
year. Every year, right? It's
I mean,
consistently like that.
and
Um,
then the Peach Belt, you mentioned like, Georgia College has a new coach, but has some familiarity with Pelkey. He was at Flagler
yeah.
previously, and I mean he was under last 2 seasons. He was under coaches with over 80 years of experience in both Greg Williams and Dave Barnett. So I think that goes a long way.
Sure.
You would think, a team I think that's going to be really on the rise. Again, going back to pedigree, I know when you first started covering Division II, this was a team that was consistently up there, Columbus State.
Yep. I have them pegged as the Peach Belt winners in my preseason preview. And a lot has to do with it with Coach App. Look, who is it? North Georgia, Georgia College, and Lander, right? They all have new head coaches. And those were the 3 teams to beat last year. And then you have, record wise, I should say, in the PBC. And then you have Columbus State, who is right there in the mix of things like they always are. And you have Coach App, who is a national champion, coach. And this is really, when you look at at least the 2000s, the only PBC team with real success in the tournament, real success, is Columbus State. And sure, North Georgia has snuck its way into actually not Cary, but when they were in Grand Prairie, but to the finals. North Georgia made an appearance, but really the team with the most consistency in the PBC over the years has been Columbus State. And what did they do? I have it open right here. They finished, where's their overall record? 30-23 to be a down year for your program says everything you need to know about them, right? That they're just fine, and I think that they're the team to beat in the Peach Belt as we're going into the season.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that. Like they bring back a ton of their offense, and I think that will speak volumes to their success. I mean, you got 4 guys with an OPS above 900 in that conference. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Caden Evans, Luke Miller, Cole Ison, Warwick Wilmot, and then a few guys that probably will take a step up, especially Jackson Chisak, Bryce Knox, Michael Cruz. Part of that big rally where in the Peach Belt tournament where they scored 11 on North Georgia in the 9th, to eliminate them. Like that's just part of going a long way. And then the question mark a little bit is their rotation, but which one of their bullpen guys, they bring back a ton of bullpen guys, will take a step up and be that rotation arm. And I think, one guy to think of is like a Tucker Starling, a Sawyer Wilson as well, Bailey Thorne, who struck out over 25% of batters last year. But yeah, like that, and then like new coaches, Lander especially, because they got a new coach 2 weeks ago.
Right.
Burke leaves to take a pro job with the Washington Nationals, and they promote their assistant Nick Pop, but that's still question marks because now you have to go under a new leader. There's still question marks there.
Yeah. It's and it's not the region to have question marks. Let's just say that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can't get by with question marks.
Right.
But a team I'll be intrigued to see who's leading the Conference Carolinas to go to the Peach Belt is Keith Gorman at USD Aiken. Be interesting to see what year 1 looks like there with Gorman. I know last year they made a Peach Belt tournament appearance. So again, another thing with previous where I mentioned with John Martin is as time goes on, be interesting to see how Aiken progresses under a coach like Gorman.
Yeah.
Because Gorman took a team like Barton and made them into a perennial contender in the Conference Carolinas, the years he was there.
Yeah. Barton was in one of those teams that scored over 400 runs, but I think I'm going to look it up real quick. I want to say they returned less than 10% of that team. And you have it here on the team sheets. I'm looking. I'm getting there.
Oh yeah, they do.
Yeah, you're already there.
They returned 5% of their team from last year.
Yeah, that's tough. That's tough.
Yeah. So tough to make there, but you know what else is tough is we talked about it earlier, and now we're down to our final two. Let's talk about the South Central region.
I mean, it really comes down to, well, you got to start with the Lone Star, right? And I don't think that they're the better conference. They definitely look like there's really good teams there, right? I think if you look, we kind of talked about it being in Colorado. You know, if you look at stats from the outset, I think it favors the Lone Star, right? But if you really watch baseball and you watch what they're doing, there are plenty of good RMAC teams deserving of a chance in the tournament. That said, obviously UT Tyler, you know, Drew Schmidt back, Hornback back. Like these are you go and you make conference program history at the D2 level. Obviously, they were very good at the D3 level. You make program history at the D2 level. Then you got Blomquist back. You know, the guys you got back to do this again, to run it back, piled on top of what we talked about earlier with Angelo State returning probably the least amount of players that they ever have in, well, not ever, but in my experience covering them. You know, you got two teams right there. Lubbock Christian's going to be in the mix, especially with Johnny Gomez back and some of those guys. West Texas A&M, I feel like always has insane pitchers that come out of nowhere, right? That all of a sudden throwing 98 miles an hour, and you're like, where did this guy come from? St. Mary's, St. Ed's, like those are all teams that can be sneaky and come out of nowhere. I do think UT Tyler is the team to beat. We already talked about it. We have him at number 11. Angelo State could return no one, but Brooks is going to have a team. I'm sorry. I don't see this team ever being lower than third place, no matter what they bring back. And then that really just puts the RMAC at a complete lopsided disadvantage, especially when you look at a Regis or you look at MSU Denver and what they lost. And again, knowing that Colorado Mesa, I want to make sure I get the number right. I'm pretty sure this is right. Coach Hanks is entering his 28th season, and they've won 22 RMAC championships under him. Like, there are no guarantees in life, but Colorado Mesa winning the RMAC is certainly close to one of them.
Yeah, and you know this region again. You mentioned just the toughness of it. Yeah, Angelo State. Doesn't matter if they lost their entire team from last year; they're going to be in the mix. Like they just built that pedigree, and they can attract talent from everywhere.
Yeah.
Right. But like a team like St. Edwards, again, that's another team where sneaky mix, especially when you return Connor Cox, who hit over 400 with an OPS over 1100. Like that's another team you look out for. I know Lubbock Christian, I'm high on. They have a pretty good guy who Carlos, I believe Malden is his name. He was at a JUCO last year, but was previously at Oregon. And it seems like he's a bat. You know, you have Kyle Lewis, Brock DiGiorina returning. It's just that West Texas pitching, you know, how do you handle those West Texas wins? Because we talk about the RMAC, but, you know, the West Texas wins where it's blowing 30 miles an hour out straight out to the outfield, you know, that think back to that it was a Monday game. It was like 18-17. Lubbock Christian upset Angelo State, and you know Brevin McCool hit 4 home runs that game. Like it's, you know, how do you weather that storm, pitching wise? Because you had a pretty incredible guy in Ryan Marquardt who did it pretty well last year. Have to replace him, but yeah, it's just in my eyes again, this is UT Tyler's year. They're the favorite. You know, you mentioned Blomquist, but Caden Copeland is a transfer from Sam Houston. You know, he was tabbed as preseason pitcher of the year, and he hasn't thrown a single D2 inning.
It's hard for me, you know, like in my previews on the D2 report, I like to name a player a year, pitcher a year, and a newcomer a year. it's really hard for me to go ahead and give a newcomer like a pitcher or player of the year award. You don't know how they're going to translate. And it could be the wrong thing to do on my end, but that guy's good.
Yeah. No, he's good. That's what I'm saying. It's uncharted territory to be able to say, hey, you're a newcomer, but we think you're going to be pitcher of the year.
Yeah.
So it goes a long way. But yeah, the RMAC, again, it's hard to say. Like we've talked about this before. Colorado Mesa is just a team that you don't know. You know what's going to happen, but who's going to dethrone them in the RMAC at this point? And it's hard to say. Because we mentioned Regis lost a lot, MSU Denver lost a lot. But a team I could see as sneaky, especially with returning pitching, is Colorado State Pueblo.
Yeah.
They returned 62% of their team, and or 62% of their pitching. It's just who.
Don't look at the
who outside.
Don't look at the ERA.
Who outside of Travis Farrell is going to be that guy that replaces him?
Yeah, that's a big one. But yeah, it's wild, that part of the country. I'm looking at my RMAC report, and it's just, it's such a wild card. It's again outside of Colorado Mesa.
Yeah, and to cap this off, our last region, the West region. Let's start there. Let's start with something that's more of a certainty. The GNAC.
So we're starting with the one conference without an auto bid.
Yeah, that's true. It's their second straight year. Funny enough, though, last year, no auto bid, but they got 2 teams in.
Crazy, right?
Yeah.
I don't see anything changing with the Nighthawks. Northwest Nazarene at the top. Karpstein is back. I like what they did. What they did in the transfer portal, and the West region is tough. CCAA is usually tough. Point Loma is always right there. Westmont, they transitioned in, and they've been an absolute threat since they've touched the D2 baseball field. So I'm saying all that for Northwest Nazarene to make it to Cary twice since 2021. This is a program that has a great head coach, that has great recruiting in a hard part of the country to recruit. And
absolutely,
they are. I don't see any reason that they don't win, that they're not the team to beat in the GNAC, however we want to call it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, think about it too. Like Joe Schaefer, prior to being at Northwest Nazarene, he was at Point Loma. And obviously, it's easy to recruit in Point Loma. Hey, come to sunny San Diego, California. The weather's never bad. Yeah. But being able to recruit there and find the talent that they did. Now, they did lose quite a bit of talent. But, being able to say, having the 2-way player of the year, the pitcher of the year last year. But not only that, being able to say, hey, one of our kids transferred to the University of Florida.
Yeah.
And that goes a long way. And, having a bunch of guys who transferred to Division I schools, yes, I'd like to have them in Division II, but we're in this era of, it's just going to happen. Can't control it. But that just means you have talent in that program.
Yeah.
Being able to have that. So, having those guys, I know. Want to mention preseason first team All-American Wade Duncan as a reliever.
Mm-hmm.
He's coming back. He'll be a big piece of that staff. But the sneaky team again. I don't know if they're sneaky because they made a regional last year, but Montana State Billings, they return a decent amount back, and they have 2 of their 4 starters back. Sam Coxon being one of them, who was the conference freshman of the year. Be interesting to see how they continue to improve, because again, with Waddups at Billings, he has consistently raised in terms of wins over the last couple of years as well.
Yeah. And again, I have my report open here. Just a couple of the transfers that they have. You got KB Bell, who hit 373 with a 1.046 OPS and 6 home runs last year, right? You have Cody Snow, a right-handed pitcher who went with 2.67 ERA, 1.31 WHIP, and he improved his strikeout rate at the JUCO level. Like, you went out and you got really good guys. Carson Wapples. Again, I don't know. He was a JUCO guy, but 4-0 and 10 starts with a 2.55 ERA, 1.34 WHIP. So here you are. Montana State Billings, you made the tournament last year, and you can make the argument you did lose a bunch, but you got better, right? Or at least at the bare minimum, you stayed even, right?
Yeah, and you're gonna stay competitive. I know that I'm certain that they have a pretty tough schedule as well.
Yeah.
Going into 2026, which again helps their case. They go down to San Bernardino. They're at Pueblo. They play Regis. They go at Mesa, which I always thought before starting conference play for the rest of the year. But then they have a weekend, the final weekend before the conference tournament against Colorado School of Mines. So, I mean, it goes a long way. It helps in being able to have that. But now, with the GNAC again, we'll see if they can get more than one bid. But the CCAA and the Pac West, before we wrap this up, the CCAA, again, it comes down to pedigree. A team like Monterey Bay, because they, like UND, have been to 3 straight super regionals now, but they have been 0 for 3 in terms of getting it to carry. But again, Walt White does a great job with that program year in and year out. Now I know Benton at Cal Poly Pomona, they had a down year last year, but that's not typically their MO. You should expect them to bounce back with their options there. Another team to mention, Chico State. They had a great, they had a competitive year last year, thought that they were, pretty close to a regional team, didn't turn their way. But, again, if you bring back your ace starter or your Friday night guy and Rocco Borelli, you have a chance.
Yeah. I like Cal State San Bernardino. I think they could be sneaky good. But again, now we go question marks. San Francisco State is gone, right? So that now you're boosting up a team because they've had a nice little run the last 2 years. Cal State, Dominguez Hills, what do they do this year? But I think Chico State, even though only 31 wins last year, they're consistent 31 wins, right? Like that's their floor. So that's a team you got to watch. I don't know that anyone else. Cal Poly Pomona for sure is a team that could bounce back. I mean, you look at a Colorado Mesa, they scheduled them early last year, and I think they're going there again this year, right? We said, but they scheduled them early because they want to build their strength of schedule. Like, they didn't schedule them early to go get a cakewalk, right? Like, this was a team that was supposed to be good last year. At injuries and things didn't go their way, so I could definitely see a big bounce back, a big, like, one of those conversations, like, people that didn't really watch too closely last year are like, wow, how did this 12-win team win 30? But I wouldn't be surprised if they did.
Yeah, because, I mean, part of it, too, Benton, ever since he's took over, he's had all but two seasons with under 30 wins, and one of those 2 seasons was 29 wins.
Yeah.
Obviously, not counting the COVID year in 2020, and then where most of the CCAA teams, Cal Poly Pomona being one of them, didn't play at all in 2021. But that's just a winning program, and so they just had a down year last year, so fully expect them to recover. But yeah, that's the competitor from the CCAA, and we'll cap it off with the Pac West. We already mentioned 2 teams that are ranked. But any other teams come to mind?
I mean, Hawaii Pacific's offense was insane last year. I know, and they return a nice amount of it. Again, like, they return. Let's see on your thing. 45% of their offense, and they were the top offense in the league last year. So I think that's definitely a team to watch. I like Vanguard. They were definitely much better than expected. And I like Jessup. I like the Pac West is like welcoming these new teams in, and they're just boom, they're coming in. They're like, yeah, we're ready. I think
Yeah,
that makes for interesting baseball because we don't know a lot about them. I think the biggest question mark is, Azusa Pacific, just a few years removed from always being in the hunt, and now all of a sudden, a couple sub 500 seasons. Like, what's your expectations there?
and not only that, but it, correct me if I'm wrong. It's either their final season or second to last season in Division Two before they drop down to Division Three.
Yeah, I think it's two. It sounds right. It's
Or
just
they,
it's wild.
yeah, and
Wild.
people like Jessup's is a team that really isn't talked about. They won 36 games last year.
Yeah, they were great.
They're great. They returned 2/3 of their pitching staff too.
Yeah,
So I
and
mean, it brings a long way. Like you bring back, two of your three or two of your four weekend guys, and I'm sure one of those guys, like a lot of those guys coming back, are a bunch of spot starters. I'm sure like Tyler Lamperti is going to be a guy that takes a step up and says, "All right, I'll take that last starting role."
yeah, and I'm looking right now. I'm pretty sure they gave the business to Point Loma and Westmont last year. Like they did not shy away from those two guys. Westmont, they went 3-1 in a 4-game series against Westmont, right? And then where's the Point Loma? Point Loma, they lost the series 3-1. But I mean, you hung with Westmont. Westmont was fantastic last year.
Yeah, Westmont won over 40 games, and we expect Westmont to be at the top again. But yeah, like a team like Jessup will give them fits. Now, I'm not sure. Do you know if Jessup is postseason eligible yet? Or
I believe they were. Hold on. Just a baseball tournament. I believe I looked and they were, but I could be wrong. Let's take a quick look. As of September 1st, 2025, Jessup has achieved full NCAA Division II member status, making its baseball team eligible for the tournament.
there we go.
Yeah.
So they are postseason eligible. So again, like with the metrics of that, how does their metrics look when they have 36 wins in the Pac West? It'd be interesting to see. And yeah, like you mentioned, they fight with Westmont.
Yeah. I think they're going to be a fun team to watch.
They will. And, not obviously to mention the teams like Point Loma and Westmont, of course, they're going to be in and year out. Like,
yeah.
What Point Loma has won 4 straight years, won at least 35 games.
Oh, yeah.
Westmont has done since joining Division II is just win.
Yep. That's all they've done. Yeah.
And you have the history of the Coach Paul Spagdis there too.
Yeah.
Of what he did at Azusa before going to Northeast before coming back. But that kind of wraps it up there. Great breakdown and talk about, we kind of went longer than we expected, but it's great to be able to break this down with Wayne. And so, Wayne, I appreciate you coming on and being able to talk, Division II baseball. And man, the season's right around the corner, and it'll be wall to wall from here on out until the first week of June.
Yeah, I'm excited, and hopefully we meet up in Cary in person again next year.
Yeah, hopefully the schedules will line up, and hopefully you don't have a full-time job conference to go to.
No, it's a little bit later this year. I already looked at the schedule.
Perfect. So hopefully we'll make up Cary and see you then. But until then, enjoy the wonderful 2026 Division II baseball season.
Thanks for having me.
We'd like to give a big thank you to all of our regional tier Patreon members. We couldn't make it to the 9th inning without the support of all of you. You're the real MVPs, hitting a home run for the team every single time. Thank you.